Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order our meeting. I'm Chair of the Housing Policy and Development Committee, and this is our regularly scheduled meeting, April 24th. I'm Cam Gordon, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Goodman, Schrader, and Reich. We're a quorum of the committee, so we can conduct our business. We have no consent items on our agenda today, so we can move right ahead with the printed agenda, which includes a public hearing on a land sale and then 2 discussion items. So I'm going to go ahead and call up Mr. Ramadan to present our land sale at 2406 McNair Avenue North. We'll have a presentation on this and then conduct a public hearing before we take a vote. Okay. All right. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. We have 2406 McNair Avenue, Parcel C. This is a unique land sale to CenterPoint Energy to improve their existing public utility service. The sale is done under the side yard sales program. Policies for the program were established by the City Council on January 15, 2016. The land sale conforms to the real estate disposition policy adopted by the City Council on April 1, 2004. 2406 McNair was acquired on June 4, 2010, followed by the acquisition of 2410 McNair on June 18, 2010, both from Hennepin County, as tax forfeited land for their appraised values of $1 each. The lots are combined and will be subdivided if this recommendation is approved. Parcel A and B are buildable lots. Parcel C is an irregularly shaped lot, as you can see on the survey, that is non-buildable, that meets the definition of side yard in the land sales disposition policy. Because the parcel is non-buildable, staff intends to dispose of this property consistent with the city's procedures for side yard disposition, with the exception that no conservation easement will be required because it is developed. The purchaser approached the City of Minneapolis during the summer of 2018 regarding the acquisition of Parcel C as part of their 2019 planned service upgrades, which include moving their maintenance station currently located under the street in McNair to an above-ground location. CenterPoint applied for a conditional use permit that was granted by the Planning Commission on January 28, 2019. Residents within a 350-foot radius were publicly notified of the intent to seek the conditional use permit. Notification was provided to the Northside Residents Redevelopment Council, NERC, on March 6, 2019, and on March 18, 2019, the NERC board voted to support the sale of Parcel C to CenterPoint Energy. Mr. Casey Tollefson, an engineer and the contact person for CenterPoint Energy, is here with us today. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll open the public hearing then. If anyone would like to speak, they may. Welcome to come up and introduce yourself.
My name is Casey Tollefson, the engineer at CenterPoint Energy and project manager for this. First, I would just like to say thank you to Matthew Ramadan, Peter Crandall, the city planner, for their cooperation. This has been going on for, I'd say, 6 to 8 months, so I'm looking forward to the start of this project and their ongoing cooperation with this. As you may or may not be aware, CenterPoint is in the process of replacing our large transmission line throughout the city. You may have seen our crews replacing the 24-inch diameter pipe, and this is in a continuous effort to upgrade our facilities with that large pipe replacement project. The existing facility, as Matthew stated, is under the road, and this is the perfect opportunity to relocate it to an above-ground facility with a building safer and easier to access with a fence. It'll be secure, and it's only a couple hundred feet from the existing station. I have spoken to the immediate property owner to the west, and he is actually looking forward to us going in there as utility, so we can maintain and keep up the property and not have, in his words, a multifamily unit go in there and then turn into something else down the road. So he has, or we have his blessing, and I look forward to the approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this matter? Seeing no one, then I'll close the public hearing. Anybody have any comments or questions on this? Seeing none, then Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank staff for briefing me on this. It's a little bit unique, so used to being presented with homes and that kind of thing. But I'm happy to have the information that I have, and I will move approval of this item.
Thank you very much. Then on that motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries then. That will bring us to our second item on the agenda, which is the 2019 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Program Policies and Procedures and Requests for Proposals. And we're going to get a report on that from Ms. Goldberg. It seems like it's an annual thing that we do, and welcome back.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me back. I'm pleased to stand before you today and review the proposed 2019 Affordable Housing Trust Fund program. This is one of the city's most important and successful financing programs that assists in the production of multifamily affordable housing rental units. The program this year consists of 3 documents: the program policies and procedures, the actual request for proposals, and then the attachments, which is the supporting documents packet. There are a number of changes highlighted throughout those documents, of which there are a few I'm going to discuss today. Last October, staff presented several proposed changes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at the direction of City Council, and these are what I plan to go over with you in a little bit greater detail. Quickly, as a reminder, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was a program first developed in 2003 to assist in the financing, production, preservation, and stabilization of affordable and mixed-income rental housing projects. It consolidated several individual programs at that time to create a more effective use of funds to close financing gaps on multifamily rental projects with 10 units or more. The awards are structured as deferred loans, typically at 0 to 1% interest, and they are required to be affordable for 30 years. The first council-directed change I want to point out is highlighted in green on the slide. This is from the staff report presented to you last fall, and that is the minimum qualifier that 20% of the project's total number of units must be affordable to households at or below 50% AMI. This is a change from the last 2 years, which allowed for concentrated areas to have units at 20% of the units at 60% AMI. This change addresses the city's goal to promote affordable housing in all areas of the city and to help prevent displacement in neighborhoods where incomes may be lower. This next slide identifies all the city.
We already have a question on that one? So
Sure. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Just had a quick question about this. I think that was put the extra qualifier before, being able to go in 60% in certain particular areas. Is there data showing was that successful? Was that not successful? Why pushing this change, I guess?
I think the concern was when we implemented that was that we were trying to promote market rate development and raise incomes in areas, and there was concern with the amount of affordable housing needs that the city has at this time, that it's better to make the housing affordable consistent throughout the city.
Okay, well, that all makes sense. I just wanted to see if there was any data or anything to see, because those, right now, we seem to be switching goals, and this does make sense. I'm not against it in any way. I just think I'd like to, we had 2 years of that program running. Is there anything from that? Sure.
I mean, we had, I think, 2 or 3 projects that we were able to award a little bit more funding in the concentrated areas if they incorporated the 60% units. I don't know that it changed the success of the program, but it expanded the number of units we provided funding for at that AMI.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And maybe we can get some maps and some more information too offline and look at how it went. And it didn't. My impression was it wasn't enormous, didn't make an enormous difference, and there were concerns about the difference that it was making, as was bringing more expensive units into poorer parts of the city.
I can come back to that later.
Well, and I think just to explain my reason for the question, I think it is a wonderful goal that we should have affordability in all parts of the city, especially in the greatest need. But my worry is, then unless we're having mixed use in every part of the city, you're going to just create different pockets. And so I almost feel like there needs to be a step where people can stay in their neighborhood and still kind of grow as their family grows, have different housing options.
I think I'm going to be talking about that in a couple more slides a little bit more, so maybe that'll help address your concerns. And if we need to come back to the end and talk about it a little bit more, we can do that.
Thanks.
So on the next slide here, this highlights the number of city policies that we have that implement the housing requirements in the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan. These policies are outlined here, so I'm not going to go into any great detail, but we do update these policies regularly and then incorporate them into the trust fund program as requirements that either need to be met or are incented through the scoring component of the RFP. A couple policies that I'll highlight for you in the program. First is cost containment. Given the limited availability of funds, it's very important to us as staff that we recommend projects with reasonable development costs for funding. And we do this in two ways: by granting points to the most efficient projects and by comparing costs through the use of a cost predictive model. And that predictive model is the model that we share with the Minneapolis Housing Finance Agency. The Green Communities is a policy that requires projects to include green and sustainable elements to maximize energy efficiencies and healthy living environments. The Small and Underutilized Business Enterprise Program is city policy that requires projects receiving subsidies over $175,000 to meet goals established based on the project scope that maximize contracting opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. And then last is tenant protections. This is an area the city has worked hard on the last couple years. There's an attachment in the supporting documents that provides guidance on how projects can screen people in versus screening people out, and our policies have been updated to require affirmative fair housing marketing plans, longer affordability periods. As I mentioned, we require 30 years, that tenants with Section 8 have to be accepted, and we require advertising on Housing Link. In addition, the city follows federal and city guidelines regarding relocation when that's applicable, although we do discourage displacement if at all possible. In our duty to affirmatively further fair housing, the city is required by HUD to identify areas of concentrated poverty and areas with racial or ethnic population concentrations. And this is, again, a policy that we're working from that was presented to you last fall. The Metropolitan Council has developed definitions for areas of concentrated poverty as well as areas of concentrated poverty where 50% or more of the residents are people of color for the region. The data analysis behind this map has been proven to be a little bit more accurate than the data we were using previously, and we feel this will benefit the city's goals and policies. The city encourages and financially supports the production and preservation of affordable housing in all areas of the city. This comprehensive community investment strategy is coordinated and place-based. The city supports investment outside of the ACP 50s, which are the green areas, to expand the distribution of affordable housing and facilitate mobility for residents wishing to increase locational choice. The city supports investment inside the ACP 50s, again, the green areas, to improve housing stability for current residents, support and improve existing community assets, revitalize and help prevent involuntary displacement. And so again, this goes towards the areas we evaluate where 20% the previous year, you were able to have 20% of your units at 60% AMI in these concentrated areas. And the concern, I think, was that we wanted to make sure that the affordability was consistent throughout the city. The city is required to comply with a number of underwriting criteria to meet the fiduciary responsibilities of managing both federal and local public dollars. I won't go into super great details about those financial criteria. Unless you have questions, I'll note that it's attachment 9 in the supporting documents that you have before you. In addition to the evaluating criteria, there are a number of other factors that we take into consideration when we recommend a project for an award. And one is scoring against the city's goals and policies to reflect the degree to which a project is meeting these priorities. There are other factors we do take into consideration, and that includes the time frame by which a project can close, the significance of funding gaps remaining, comprehensive plan guidance, anti-displacement policies, and geographic location and distribution. This next council-directed change is a big one. This again is from last fall, and this is to increase the maximum awards a project can receive. For 2019, awards are proposed to be $30,000 per affordable unit at any size, at or below 50% AMI, $40,000 per affordable two-bedroom unit at 30% or below AMI, and then $50,000 per affordable 3-bedroom unit at or below 30% AMI, and that is to incent the incorporation of larger units into projects that have deeper affordability. Awards are subject to a maximum of 15%, excuse me, of the total development costs, whichever is less. There are a few special initiatives I just want to point out. First is the Senior Housing Initiative. This is a goal to achieve a minimum of 35 senior housing units in each ward by 2025. The wards that have already met this goal are 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, and 10. And we continue to try and look for the projects that have not achieved that goal as they come in. I do believe you have one on the horizon. Next is the Large Family Housing Initiative, which incents projects to incorporate 3-bedroom units to accommodate families at 30% AMI. This is an increase in population that has challenges finding affordable housing. These projects qualify for an award of up to $50,000 a unit for each 3-bedroom unit created at 30% AMI. And then last, the contingency pool, or not last, I guess, I have 2 on there. The contingency pool was recommended to be continued last fall when these recommendations were presented to you due to its success. This is a special set aside of funds that allows up to an additional $15,000 a unit be awarded to projects that have a final gap after securing all sources that will close within the year. Typically, projects have needed additional funding in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 a unit. The recommendation and approval of this funding set aside will be presented to council in a separate council report in a couple months after staff finishes up doing a little bit of analysis to make sure we have an understanding of what that need is. And then last, now, the pipeline process, which has also been successful and was recommended to be continued, to be available for qualified projects that haven't been fully funded. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund RFP is issued on an annual basis. Sorry. The RFP is issued in May, proposals are due in July, and then underwriting and scoring and evaluation occur through September, with staff recommendations made to the council in October and awards made by City Council in November. The 2019 Affordable Housing Trust Fund budget is $20 million. Staff is still evaluating project needs for the contingency pool, as I previously mentioned, and we're also anticipating that to be around $2 million. Again, that will be a separate RCA that comes in for your approval, but we're still finalizing some analysis around that number. In addition, staff anticipates a need of approximately $1 million for the pipeline process for qualified projects that have not yet been fully funded. Therefore, we think there's about $17 million that will be available for funding for the annual RFP this year for new projects. I'm sorry, I have a frog in my throat.
That's all right.
So I'll conclude. The RCA before you today has highlighted all these proposed changes for the RFP for the 2019 annual round, and it has been sent out for public comment since March 1st. We did receive 3 responses which were included in your packet. Staff is recommending approval of all changes presented in the RCA, and we would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? I don't see any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, and I'm willing to move the action forward then. There's 2 actions. One is approving the 2019 Affordable Housing Trust Fund request for proposals, and the other is approving the trust fund program policies and procedures. Any discussion on that? All those in favor then, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we'll move on to our 3rd item. This is our approving our 2020 housing tax credit allocation plan, and we'll have Amy Gessler reporting. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. And I'm here today to present our annual update to the city's tax credit qualified allocation plan and procedural manual. The Housing Tax Credit Program is a federal program that's administered by the IRS, provides a reduction in federal tax liability in exchange for investment in qualified affordable rental housing, either new production or preservation of that type of housing. Federal law requires tax credit allocating agencies to establish a qualified allocation plan and a procedural manual, which we use to allocate both 9% credits and the 4% tax credits that come automatically with an allocation of housing revenue bonds. Minneapolis, as you recall from prior years, administers its tax credit program in partnership with the City of St. Paul through the Minneapolis-St. Paul Joint Housing Finance Board. The cities use a common qualified allocation plan and procedural manual, but each city does have separate scorecards for each city to demonstrate our priorities for each of the programs. And this year, as in past years, staff is proposing a number of changes to both documents to conform with federal regulations, follow best practices in tax credit allocation, and maintain consistency with Minnesota Housing's tax credit program. So all of our proposed changes are noted in the staff report, and I want to call out a few of the more significant ones. And the first one, which is the most significant, is we are incorporating the ability for projects to utilize income averaging. And that is a new option that was enabled with federal tax reform in 2017. And it permits tax credit projects to include some units that are at affordability levels above 60% AMI, so long as they are offset by lower rents such that the project averages out to 60%. So, and income averaging does have the potential to enable more units affordable at 30 and 40% in tax credit projects within the city, which is a high priority for the city and why we're recommending it be included this year. A second change that I wanted to note is similar to the trust fund program presentation that you just heard from Carrie. We are proposing for the tax credit program that we would utilize the ACP 50 map to designate areas of concentration of poverty for purposes of tax credit, the tax credit program. We're proposing a few changes to our 9% scoring categories to consolidate scoring that prioritizes projects outside of ACP 50 areas. And then finally, we're proposing a new 9% scoring category for funding commitments for supportive housing services. And the idea behind this category is to really provide an additional incentive for developers who are interested in pursuing supportive housing, which there is a tremendous need for in the city, to encourage them to look out and look for non-traditional funding sources to try to make those projects more feasible.
So can I just ask, in terms of creating this category, is there then some points for it, or are we actually setting aside some funding?
Right. So it is a point recommendation. So up to 10 points, and we're proposing a range, kind of depending on what the nature of the commitment is. So.
Thank you.
Sure. So we have made a few changes to the proposed draft since they were released for the 45-day review. Those are highlighted in yellow in the attachments that are with the staff report. I wanted to call out two a little more significant changes to your attention. The first one is related to income averaging. We were previously recommending that income averaging not be an option for 4% tax credit projects that have already closed and under construction, but have not yet placed their tax credits in service. We are now recommending that those projects be eligible. You know, we have some other language in the procedural manual that got us more comfortable with that approach. And then the second change I wanted to call out was related to the supportive service funding category that we were just talking about. Since it was released, we, upon further consideration, made a few adjustments to the range of points available and also the time frame of commitment for service funding. So you'll see some minor adjustments to that. And then finally, the Joint Board is scheduled to review the Qualified Allocation Plan and the Procedural Manual for final approval on May 8th. We anticipate issuing the RFP for 9% tax credits in mid-May, about the same time as the trust fund RFP, with applications due in early July. And then we anticipate being back before you with recommendations for project selections in October. I want to note we did receive one comment on the QAP, which is attached to the staff report. And with that, I can answer questions.
So just to clarify on the time for the supportive services, that was extended to be required to be 30 years, or is it do we change the points as it goes up to 30 years?
We change the points as it goes up to 30 years. Okay. Right.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And part of the rationale for that, Mr. Chair, was to align it a little more directly with the affordability period in a 9% tax credit project, which is a minimum of 30 years.
Appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments on this? Well, I really appreciate the work that went into this, and also with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think they both work well together. I actually appreciate having one map to look at now and understand. I think that may also help people on the outside who are applying for these to understand that a little bit better. I'll be very curious to see how this income averaging works, whether we end up getting a lot fewer but more affordable units, or how that comes out as an interesting idea. I think we know we need deeply affordable units, and we're hoping it might encourage more of them, but we also just need more at 50 and more at, all over. So be interesting to see how that goes. So with that, I'll move this forward and move approval of our Housing Tax Credit Program Qualified Allocation Plan and Procedure Manual. Seeing no comments on that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries, and that concludes the business before us, and thanks everybody for coming. I never did introduce Council President and the Vice Chair, but glad you were here. This meeting is adjourned.